So in this video, I want to talk about selling in this bull market, just some general things to think about with selling right now, the consequences to those things. These types of videos, you guys know, it's just a bunch of just information, just all jumbled up, and these are just discussion videos. Now, before I start this whole topic, you guys can see obviously here, I'm deciding to just forego recording on my phone, and when I make these discussion videos from now on, I'm just going to be recording from my desktop because the audio quality from my phone, there's just something messed up when I upload the video from my phone. So from now on, it's just going to be through my computer. I bet you guys probably don't care because these types of videos, there's nothing to really look at. So I'm like, you know what, why even record on my phone? So from now on, it's going to be recorded on my desktop. Audio quality should obviously have no problems like this. And you guys probably would prefer this way anyways, because I've heard some of you guys say in the comments that you just watched or just listened to my videos in the car or something, so you're not even looking at anything, so it doesn't really matter. So from now on, it's going to be recorded like this. Audio quality is pretty good on desktop, so hopefully you guys enjoy it from now on, these discussion videos. So I want to talk about selling. Now, I've talked about selling many times before. Many people in the space always talk about selling, things to think about. But I want to bring up a few different topics. But I guess the first thing I will just mention, because it's like the general basis that everyone talks about with selling. Do you need the money? That is the biggest thing people talk about. Oh, if you don't need the money, don't sell, right? It's like a general thing people say in the space. Now, I think for the most part, it is pretty true that, okay, if you don't need the money, you probably shouldn't sell it, especially if it's out of print, right? For example, Sword and Shield. Generally speaking, Sword and Shield booster boxes, in the next couple of years, will they most likely go up? Potentially exponentially? Yes. So if you don't need the money, why would you sell now? It's a fair argument to make. And I, like I said, generally agree with this statement. But one thing I will say is that if you're selling right now, let's say because maybe you want to reinvest your money, but let's say you have the money to, buy more stuff, but you just want to use your profits and your money that you've already invested in Pokemon, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's what I've sort of done in the past year. I've sold some Sword and Shield stuff because I wanted to reinvest into some newer stuff. And if you were doing that, there's nothing wrong. And just generally speaking, taking profits really at any point, regardless of the market, is really not a bad idea. So if that's what you're doing, don't let anyone tell you differently. Yeah, there's maybe some situations where maybe it's better to, sell something, maybe later in the future rather than at the current time. Maybe, for example, like I think selling Sword and Shield right now maybe isn't the best idea because I see another run up coming in the near future. And maybe some stats like Evolving Skies, would I sell right now? There are some, scenarios where maybe I wouldn't sell something. Maybe I would hold off. But generally speaking, selling really at any time and taking profits is not a bad idea. But there are times where maybe it's worth waiting a little bit, or maybe just not selling because you may be on that tipping point of some crazy gains. I guess another example I could speak is for sets that are just going to go that are just about to be out of print. For example, 151. Paldean Fates, all the top, the first like 4.5 sets, those are going out of print early next year. Seemingly, this market is probably going to be pretty strong by then. When things go officially out of print, there usually is a run up that happens because people are like, okay, I have no worries of reprints anymore. This is kind of my last chance. I'm going to buy now before all the supply gets dried up because they're not making anymore. So there are some things to think about with that statement of. With selling, right? Generally, like taking profits, there are some things to think about other than just like, oh, I'm just gonna take profits on anything. There's some things to think about. So, I guess that's generally the first thing I wanted to talk about is how, selling, taking profits. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not against taking profits, right? So that's I guess the general first thing I want to talk about. But other than that, I want to talk about sort of the math that some people don't actually think about with selling. So, like I said, generally people say if you don't need the money, don't sell. But I want to give you guys some perspective of it's pretty simple math, but some people probably have never thought about this of like compounding returns and reinvesting money. And I'm going to give you guys an example with maybe some Sword and Shield stuff. Let's use Sword and Shield as an example. So let's say right now you have a Darkness Ablaze booster box. You have maybe Vivid Voltage booster box, maybe Astro Radiance Battle Styles, any of those, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Rebel Clash, those types of sets that aren't that great, okay? And even if they're out of print, it doesn't really matter for this example, what I'm trying to get at here. But let's say you right now sell those booster boxes off, okay? And let's say, I don't know, you paid $100 on average for whatever the thing is. And let's say right now, just to make math simple, let's say right now it's $500. Okay, so you bought it at 100, you're gonna sell it for 500. Let's say you sell that right now today. Okay, and let's say, just like I said, simple math. I know you're not there's fees and all those other things, but let's say you bought it for 100 and you sold for 500. So now you have $500 in your pocket. So let's say with that money, that $500, let's say you go out and buy Prismatic Evolutions, for an example. Let's say Prismatic Evolutions, you buy an ETB. Let's keep the math simple. At right now, the market price is like 135, 140. Let's just say $100. Let's say you bought it a couple months ago for like $100 because you could have bought them for $100. Let's say even a month ago. So let's say you bought it for $100, Prismatic Evolutions ETB. So let's say you bought 5 of them for $100 because I'm trying to keep the math simple. Okay, so just to reiterate, you bought a booster box, Sword and Shield, a sort of bad set, for $100. You bought it for that much. You sell it for $500. With that money, for $500, you buy 5 Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes. Let's say in a year from now, Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes are $300. Now you might be like, that's an insane return. There's no way. But if you actually look at data and some history of these other specialty sets, Prismatic Evolutions ETBs going from $100, and obviously they're $140 today, but to go from $100 to $300 in a year, obviously assuming the market stays relatively strong, is not actually that insane of a thing when you actually look at other sets. So let's say you did that, right? And let's say in a year, Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes go to $300 because let's say they don't reprint them. So with that $500, you bought 5 Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes for $100 each, and then a year later, let's say they're $300 each. That means they're, now $300 each. What's 300 times 5? $1,500. So on your $100 investment, originally from that booster box, you were actually effectively up 1,500%. You're up 15x your money. Now, is it possible that your booster box you sold for $500, let's say in a year, at the same point Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes hit 300, is it possible that booster box is the same as $1,500 and then you still would have 15 extra money, or maybe it's $2,000? Is that possible? Sure, but there's a reason why. I gave a specific example with Darkness Ablaze, Vivid Voltage, Rebel Clash, Battle Styles. In my opinion, let's say in a year or two, whatever time frame you want to use, is it more likely that Darkness Ablaze, Vivid Voltage booster box is going to 3x from where it's at $500? In my opinion, it's not highly likely. But Prismatic Evolutions, the Elite Trainer box, can I see it more realistically being a possibility that from $100 it goes to $300 in a year based on 151, based on Paldean Fates? I personally think so. Obviously, granted, they don't print it a million times into the ground. I think it's possible. So what I'm trying to get at here is that there are things, reinvesting returns and kind of compounding that way, where it actually might be smart to sell an investment, sell a product off that's maybe not as high in demand, that has recently appreciated, like those boxes I listed, to then reinvest into a more high-flying set, especially Prismatic. Like I gave an example where it's gotten reprinted recently. Obviously now it's a little bit more expensive, but just a month ago you could have bought them for $100. Your returns could be exponential if you actually were to sell, whatever, older product that maybe isn't as good, to buy a newer one that has more higher potential. So I just wanted to explain, I guess, that simple math. Hopefully you guys followed along, because I know math can be hard, but effectively, like I said, from $100 to $500, you invest the $500 to, 5 Elite Trainer boxes for $100 each. They go up 3x, from your original investment, of $100. Well, now if Prismatic Evolutions Elite Trainer boxes are $300 each, you have 5 of them, you're at $1,500 from your original $100 investment. That's a 15x, 1,500% gain. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I know, maybe I explained it not very clearly, but that's something that is worth talking about with selling, because I know a lot of people are so against selling, but that is the math that I do, where I'm like, okay, if I'm selling a product, now at this point, I don't really have any bad products, I would say. But if you have a product that generally usually isn't very liquid or very sought after, right? And it's just recently gone up, it might not be the worst idea to sell that and reinvest into a more high flying new set. Now, I'm not saying to do that because there could be circumstances where I'm wrong. It's very possible. So don't just go based off of what I'm saying here. But I want you guys to think about that being a possibility, that selling isn't always the worst thing ever. You can actually see better returns if you reinvest that into maybe a newer set, maybe just got reprinted. There are some instances where that could be a play. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to convince you guys to do that because you may do better holding the item originally. You maybe, but it's something to think about. Some simple math that I wanted to explain, just for your information if you've never thought about that aspect of buying or selling something and buying and reinvesting. So that's all I want to talk about in this video, just some things about selling. Hope you guys enjoyed, and this is going to be the continued format in the future. But that's all I want to say in this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.